Farming, like fishing, was one of the central pillars in the whole Brexit campaign and indeed referendum. But now, post Brexit, almost a year after, one full year of Brexit done properly, but of course, the Brexiteers are now saying that Brexit hasn't been done properly, but you know, that's Brexiteers for you, never happy about anything they've got. And when you look at what the main thing was with farming, was the whole idea was what we're going to do is we're going to leave the common agricultural policy, which is awful, it's terrible, even though farmers got so much from it. There were far more plus sides to the common agricultural policy than the word downsides. Like I say, farmers got a ton of money from the EU. They got access to the single market and customs union, which would again help to transfer and sell their goods all over Europe. Again, and when it comes to food, being able to transfer your food quickly to very close regions and quickly helps with the price. If you couldn't sell it to a company here, then guess what? You could go and sell all your corn or sugar beet or whatever to somewhere in France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark. Take your pick. You've got 27 countries to choose from where you can now sell your goods. And of course, the promises of this about, oh, don't worry, we'll replace the money you get from the EU. Well, by 2027, the government have said we're cutting those funds completely, which, as we like to remind you all, way back in 2016, we on the Remain side were saying that if we leave this and farmers lose all that investment money that they get from the EU, then about 80% of all small to medium farms could face extinction, could just go out of business. And that is what we are looking at now. And it's not just this, it's the trade deals that the government are signing as well that are literally throwing the farmers under the bus, just like with the Australian trade deal, where they pretty much rolled over and just accepted all the farming stuff that Australia asked for, which is going to lead to some immense damage to the UK farming sector. So, as always, before we do go jumping into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. And of course, on with the show. So, this comes from the central bylines with the title of "The Government is Doing Massive Damage to Farming." So Andrew Ward farms around 650 hectares in Lincolnshire. He specialises in arable crops. He's successful and influential. In 2008, he was named the Farmers Weekly Arable Farmer of the Year, and in 2014 gained an MBE for services to agriculture after he set up Forge Aid in 2013 to help livestock farmers affected by bad weather. He's also a very unhappy man. On Christmas Eve, he took to Twitter to complain about the government breaking their promises to his industry and to the sugar beet farmers particularly on food standards and, of course, the Plant Products Protection, or the PPP, that can now be used, while he said that would put him and other farmers like him at a disadvantage. And it's not the first time that Mr. Ward has vented his feelings about the way farmers are being treated by the government. In May of 2020, he told the Lincolnshire Echo that he was very unhappy about the broken promises over the agricultural bill, when he said MPs gave assurances that food standards would be maintained, specifically for oilseed rape, only to renege on them. What makes his complaints most interesting of all is that it came a week after the North Shropshire by-election, which saw the 23,000 Conservative majority swept away by the Liberal Democrat candidate Helen Morgan. North Shropshire is, like Lincolnshire, part of rural England, where they regularly, of course, votes Conservative. In the aftermath of the result, it emerged that the farming community in the constituency were just as disgusted at the government's attitude towards the industry as Mr. Ward, and saw the opportunity to take revenge. In the constituency that followed this, in the conversation that followed this original tweet, it started to become clear that Lincolnshire farmers and now also have a very poor view of the way that they are being treated by the government. As you can see the tweet here. Intrigued by these comments, I spoke to Mr. Ward to try and understand more clearly what the mood of the farming community is like now. And for what he told me, it appears that something has even changed fundamentally. The Farmers Weekly reported support for the government slipping significantly. And when you look at the possible reasons, it becomes clear that the industry is now facing something closer to an external crisis. Mr. Ward referred to an email that was leaked at the start of 2020, in which senior government advisors questioned the need for farmers and food production in the UK. If that looks grim, just last month, the Prime Minister said that farmers could not be expected to continue with business models which, in his words, have, quote, held Britain back. Put those two statements together, and you can now begin to see what Mr. Ward told me, saying the government is doing massive damage to farming. He wasn't exaggerating. After the UK left the EU, farmers were promised the basic payment scheme, or the BPS, to replace the Common Agricultural Policy would continue. Under the BPS, farmers were paid for the crops that they grow rather than the land that they farm. Under this new scheme, the government was emphasizing on public money for public goods. Central to this is the idea that farmers and other land managers will be paid for delivering primarily environmental benefits rather than the amount that they farm, the crops that they grow, with incentives to increase biodiversity, restore landscapes, promote animal welfare, and increase productivity through investment in new equipment and technology. The Institute for Government reports just this week the government released more details about this idea. The basic payment scheme, which is being phased out gradually, though will be gone totally by 2027, and according to Mr. Ward, the details of its replacement, the Sustainable Farming Initiative, aren't even fully decided. The lack of clarity means rising costs are going to be covered by the income, and farmers cannot plan for the future. Mr. Ward gave three examples. Fertilizer is up 300%. Nitrogen alone had gone from £200 a tonne to £640. The fuel and some PPP will have doubled. And of course, with DEFRA offering incentives to farmers to leave the industry, the problem for pig farmers over the shortage of abattoir workers and the way that DEFRA has failed to respond to any of the lobbying Mr. Ward says that has been done, it starts to look as though the government really does intend to sell farmers down the river. So what about the consequences of these policies? It appears that some farmers in all sectors are already cutting back on their plans for 2022. And that would surely result in even now less food being produced. A starting position for a country that is somewhere only about 60% food secure. Would direct action work? So Mr. Ward told me that farmers were in a very unique position to highlight the plight of their industry, but he wondered whether the public would actually support direct action. Such actions are not welcomed by the National Farmers Union. The public view is important, and the government's approach seems very driven by the determination to secure trade, especially food deals with non-EU countries, no matter what the cost to the environment or the way that food is produced. Recent surveys have showed that there is wide support for UK farming and the high food standards that people are used to. So the question is whether people will actually tolerate reduced standards. Like North Shropshire, people in Lincolnshire voted to leave the EU. And increasingly, we are seeing that the sunlit uplands that were promised are far a long way from actually materialising. Witness their complaints about the state of their road network because of the lack of government support. Suppose, therefore, that Lincolnshire farmers now follow their examples of their colleagues in North Shropshire. Mr. Ward and some of his colleagues say they will not vote Conservative again. Suppose the public continues to be revolted by the sleaze and evident in the government, where we may be at the start of something genuinely significant political in the next round of elections. And that is true. I said it when this happened, the North Shropshire thing, which didn't even come up. I'm surprised this was not even reported. We got early reports in the after action report that farmers had turned against the government, that they had voted overwhelmingly for the Lib Dems. So could this now happen in other Tory constituencies? And remember, farmers make up a very substantial voting bloc for the Conservatives. So at a next general election, if they're now going to turn against the Conservatives for their treatment, all the Labour government needs to do is come up with sensible policies for farmers. Now, I don't know what those are because, again, it's not my wheelhouse before, but it's something that I would definitely be interested in actually looking at. In fact, who knows? Maybe I'll get in contact with Mr. Ward. Maybe we'll ask him to come on. Who knows? We'll see. But again, it will be very, very interesting to sort of hear from other farmers. And again, I'd be interested in hearing from you if you are a farmer in the UK. What is your opinion on all this? What's your plans for 2022? Have you had to cut back? How are you going to handle these changes? What changes are you going to have to make? Are you worried that you might not have a farm in 5-6 years time? I'd love to know what your thoughts on all this are. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.